There is a kind of silence that settles over a life when nothing seems to be moving. When the prayers have been said and said again, and the answer still hasn't come. Maybe you're sitting in that silence right now. Maybe you've been sitting in it for longer than you'd like to admit. And somewhere in that quiet, a question has started to form. One you may not have said out loud, but one that lives underneath everything else you do. Is God still working? Is He still here? Has He forgotten me? I want to sit with you in that question tonight. Not to rush past it, not to hand you a quick answer and move on, but to actually stay there for a while, in the place where things feel unfinished, and let something true settle over you. Because the truth is, the waiting itself is not empty. It only feels that way. Underneath the surface, where you cannot see and cannot measure, something is happening. Something is always happening. Think for a moment about a seed pressed into the ground. From above there is nothing to see, no proof of life, no evidence that anything is different than it was the day before. A person walking by would have no reason to believe that anything at all is taking place beneath that patch of soil. And yet, underground, in the dark, in the place hidden from every eye, the seed is splitting open. It is doing the most important work of its entire existence, and it is doing it exactly where no one can watch. That is what waiting on God so often looks like. Unremarkable from the outside, silent, slow. And yet underneath, something is splitting open that will one day break the surface and become undeniable. The question was never whether God was working. The question was whether you could trust Him while the working stayed hidden. I think we've been trained without realizing it, to measure God's presence by how much we can feel or see in a given moment. If something breaks loose, if the answer arrives, if the door swings open, we say, "There, that's God." But when the door stays closed, when the silence continues, when the same struggle greets us morning after morning, we quietly start to wonder if maybe He stepped away, as if His presence were only real when it was visible, as if faithfulness could be measured only in the moments that feel good. But presence was never meant to be proven by outcome. A parent doesn't stop loving a child the moment the child can't see them in the next room. The love doesn't flicker in and out based on visibility. It simply continues, whether noticed or not, whether felt or not. And so it is, on a much larger and steadier scale, with the way God holds you. He is not more present in the answered prayer than He is in the unanswered one. He is not nearer in the celebration than He is in the waiting room. He is simply present, unmoved by how it feels to you in a given hour. I want you to hear that again, slower this time. He is not nearer in the celebration than He is in the waiting room. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something for a long time without seeing it change. It's different from the tiredness of a hard day. It's the tiredness of a hard season, the kind that wears on your spirit in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't lived inside it. You smile because you still have to function. You show up because life doesn't pause for grief or worry. But somewhere underneath the smiling and the showing up, there's a weight you've been carrying quietly, maybe for months, maybe for years, and you've started to wonder if you'll be carrying it forever. If that's you tonight, I don't want to minimize it. I don't want to tell you it's not as heavy as it feels, because I don't know your particular weight, and I won't pretend to. But I do want to tell you something that I believe with everything in me. The fact that you are still standing, still breathing, still here at the end of a day that tried to take you under, that is not nothing. That is not weakness. That is grace, holding you up in ways you cannot always feel, but that are just as real as the ground beneath your feet. There's an old and quiet idea, one that doesn't get talked about often enough, that strength is not the absence of struggle, Strength is continuing to move forward inside of it. You don't have to feel powerful to actually be held. You don't have to feel certain to actually be safe. Feelings are real and they matter, but they are not always accurate narrators of what is true. Your heart can tell you that you are alone in this, while the truth, underneath the feeling, is that you have never once been alone in it. Not for a single hour. I want to talk for a moment about the difference between being fixed and being formed. When we pray, when we ask for help, when we bring our need honestly into the quiet, what we usually want is a fix, something immediate, something visible, a change in circumstance that proves the prayer was heard. And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes the fix comes quickly, and we're grateful, and life moves on. But there's another kind of work that God does, one that is slower and deeper and far less obvious. And that is the work of forming you. Not fixing the situation around you, but shaping something within you. Patience where there was none. Trust where there used to be only fear. A kind of quiet strength that couldn't have been built any other way except through the very waiting you wanted to escape. If you're in a season where the fix hasn't come, it might be worth asking, gently, without shame. Is it possible that something is being formed in me that could only be formed here? Not because pain is good in itself, not because struggle is something to celebrate, but because there is a kind of depth in a person's spirit that is only ever built in the hard seasons, never in the easy ones. The easy seasons are a gift, and they deserve gratitude. But it is the hard ones that build the parts of you that will hold steady later, when you need to be steady for someone else. I think about the people who have shaped me, the ones whose presence felt like solid ground when everything else was shifting. And almost without exception, they were people who had been through something. Their steadiness wasn't an accident. It wasn't a personality trait they were simply born with. It was forged. It came from seasons that could have hardened them into bitterness, but instead somehow softened them into a deep and quiet strength. That's the kind of transformation that only happens over time, in the dark, underground, where no one is watching. So if you feel unseen right now, if you feel like your struggle is happening in a corner nobody notices, I want to remind you that some of the most important work in a human life happens exactly there, in the corner, in the dark, where no one is watching but the one who matters most. Let's slow down here for a moment. I want you to actually breathe, in and out, and let your shoulders drop from wherever they've been holding tension. You don't have to hold everything up right now, not in this moment. For the next little while you can simply exist here, without performing, without fixing, without figuring it all out. Just breathe and let yourself be held. There is something deeply countercultural about rest. Everything around us says produce, prove, hurry, achieve, and in that noise it can start to feel like even our faith has to be productive, like prayer has to result in something measurable, or it wasn't worth the time. But rest, real rest, the kind that isn't lazy but is actually an act of trust. Rest says, I don't have to hold this together by my own strength. I can set it down, even for a few minutes, and trust that it will still be there, still being carried, even while my hands are open and empty. Consider how strange and beautiful it is that within the story of creation, there was a day set aside not for making more, but for stopping, not because the Creator was tired, but because rest itself was declared good, right alongside everything else that had been made. If rest was built into the very rhythm of existence from the beginning, then your exhaustion is not a personal failure. It is a signal that you were never meant to carry everything without pause. You were never meant to be endlessly productive. You were made for rhythm, for seasons of labor and seasons of rest, for effort and for stillness, and both of them matter. Maybe tonight, The most faithful thing you can do is not to push harder, but to actually rest, to let your body settle, to let your mind stop spinning through every unresolved thing on your list. To trust, even in the smallest measure, that the world will not fall apart if you take this one evening to simply be still. I want to talk about fear for a moment, because I think fear is one of the quietest and most persistent forces working against peace in a person's life. Not always the loud, dramatic kind of fear, but the low hum underneath everything. The fear that something will go wrong, that the other shoe will drop, that whatever peace you're experiencing right now is only temporary and will be taken from you the moment you let your guard down. That kind of fear is exhausting because it never actually rests. It's always scanning, always bracing, always preparing for a blow that hasn't landed yet and may never land at all. And the tragedy of it is that it steals joy from moments that are actually safe, actually good, actually fine, simply because the fear insists on treating every calm moment as the eye of a storm. I don't say this to shame anyone who struggles with fear, because I understand it intimately. I know what it is to lie awake, running through every possible bad outcome, as if imagining it enough times could somehow prepare me for it or prevent it. But I've come to believe that fear, left unchallenged, doesn't protect us. It only steals from us. It takes the present moment, the only moment we actually have any power over, and spends it worrying about a future that hasn't happened yet and might never happen the way we imagine. Peace, real peace, isn't the absence of uncertainty. Life is full of uncertainty, and no amount of planning will remove all of it. Peace is something else entirely. It's the quiet confidence that whatever comes, you will not be facing it alone. It's not a guarantee that nothing bad will ever happen. It's a promise that you will be held through whatever does happen, and that is a very different kind of assurance, but it is the one that actually holds up under pressure. If you find yourself gripped by fear tonight, about your health, your finances, your relationships, your future, the safety of people you love, I want to gently invite you to name it. Not to push it away and pretend it isn't there, but to actually name what you're afraid of, and then set it down. Set it down like a heavy bag you've been carrying that was never yours to carry alone in the first place. You can name it and hand it over, and it does not mean the fear will vanish instantly. But it means you are no longer carrying it in secret, in silence, believing you have to manage it entirely on your own strength. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from feeling like you have to hold everything together for everyone else, while nobody is holding anything together for you. Maybe you're the one people call when they're falling apart. Maybe you're the strong one, the reliable one, the one who shows up no matter what. And there is something good in that. A real gift in being someone others can depend on. But even the strong ones need somewhere to set their weight down. Even the reliable ones need a place where they don't have to perform strength, where they can simply be honest about how heavy things have gotten. I want you to know that you don't have to have it all figured out to be loved. You don't have to be composed or successful or spiritually impressive to be worthy of care. Whatever image you've built, whatever role you play for the people around you, none of that is a requirement for being held by God. He is not waiting for you to get your act together before He draws near. He draws near exactly as you are, in the mess, in the exhaustion, in the moments when you don't have any strength left to perform anything at all. There's something freeing about that, if you let it actually land. You don't have to earn a way back to peace. You don't have to prove you deserve rest. You simply have to stop and let yourself receive what has actually been available to you the entire time. Let's talk about the past for a moment, because I think a lot of our present struggle is quietly shaped by things that happened long before now. Old disappointments, old wounds, moments where trust was broken, where hope was crushed, where you reached out and were met with silence or rejection instead of care. Those moments don't just disappear because time has passed. They live in us, often more than we realize, shaping how we expect the present to go based on what happened before. If you were let down by people who were supposed to protect you, it makes sense that trusting anyone, even a presence far greater and more faithful than any person, would feel risky. If your hope has been disappointed before, it makes sense that hoping again would feel dangerous, like setting yourself up for another fall. These reactions aren't weakness. They're the natural result of a heart that has been hurt and is trying, in whatever way it knows how, to protect itself from being hurt again. But I want to offer you something gently, without pressure. The past does not have to be the final word on what the future holds. The people who failed you were not a preview of every relationship to come. The disappointments you carried were real, and they deserve to be grieved, not dismissed. But grief and hope are not enemies. You can hold both. You can acknowledge what was broken and still choose, slowly, carefully, to open your heart again to the possibility of something faithful, something steady, something that will not let you down the way the past did. That kind of trust doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single decision you make and then never doubt again. It's built slowly, the way trust is always built, through small moments of showing up, of being met, of discovering again and again that this time, the presence holding you actually stays. If you need to go slowly, go slowly. Nobody is rushing you. Healing was never meant to be a race. I want to speak now to the part of you that feels unseen. Maybe you've spent years pouring into others, a job, a family, a cause, people who needed you, and somewhere in all that giving, you started to feel invisible, like your own needs stopped mattering, or maybe never mattered in the first place. Like nobody would notice if you quietly disappeared from the picture, because everyone is so used to you being the one who gives and gives and gives. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not invisible. Not for one single moment. Every quiet sacrifice you've made, every time you kept going when no one was watching, every tear you cried alone in a room where no one else could see, none of that went unnoticed. There is a kind of seeing that has nothing to do with human eyes, a kind of attention that doesn't require an audience to be real. You have been seen this entire time, in the exact moments you felt most alone. That doesn't erase the loneliness. I'm not suggesting that knowing you're seen instantly fills the ache of wanting to be seen by the people right in front of you, the people you can touch and talk to and share a meal with. Human connection matters, and if you're lacking it, that's a real loss worth naming, not something to spiritually bypass. But even while you work toward more of that human connection, even while that ache continues, I want you to know that you were never as alone as it felt. Not for a single day. There's a particular grief in feeling like your effort hasn't mattered. Like you've poured yourself into something for years, and the results still haven't come. And you're starting to wonder if any of it was worth it. Maybe it's a dream you've been chasing that keeps slipping further away. Maybe it's a relationship you fought to hold together while feeling like you're the only one fighting. Maybe it's simply the daily effort of trying to be a good person in a world that doesn't always reward that. I don't have a formula that guarantees your effort will pay off in the exact way you're hoping. I wish I did. But I do believe this. Nothing poured out in love is ever wasted, even when the outcome looks different than you hoped. The character built in you through years of faithful effort doesn't disappear just because the external result wasn't what you expected. Who you became in the process, the patience, the resilience, the depth of compassion that only comes from having struggled yourself, that stays with you. That becomes part of the foundation for whatever comes next, even if you can't see the connection yet. Sometimes the harvest looks nothing like what we planted. We plant hoping for one outcome, and something entirely different grows instead. Something we couldn't have imagined, and sometimes something even better suited to who we've become. That doesn't erase the disappointment of the outcome we originally wanted. It's allowed to still hurt that things didn't go the way you hoped. But it also doesn't mean the effort was meaningless. It means the story isn't finished yet, and you are not in a position, right now in the middle of it, to see the whole shape of what's being built. I keep coming back to this idea of the unseen hand. The sense that even when nothing visible is happening, something is still moving underneath the surface of your life. I don't say this to dismiss real pain with a spiritual platitude. Pain is pain, and it deserves to be honored, not explained away. But alongside the pain, I want to hold out the possibility that you are not actually stuck. Even seasons that feel like standing still are often seasons of deep, quiet movement. Movement you'll only be able to see clearly when you look back from somewhere further down the road. Think about how differently a season reads in hindsight compared to how it felt while you were living inside it. The hardest years of your life, the ones that felt endless while you were in them, often become, later, the years you point to as the ones that changed everything. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because pain, when carried with even a little bit of trust, has a way of becoming the foundation for something you couldn't have built any other way. I don't know what season you're in tonight. I don't know if you're in the deep quiet of waiting, or the exhausted middle of a long struggle, or a moment of fear about what's coming next. But whatever it is, I want to say this to you plainly. You have not been abandoned. Not tonight, not any night, not for a single hour of whatever you've been walking through. The silence you felt was never emptiness. It was presence, holding steady even when it didn't announce itself. It was work happening underground, even when nothing broke the surface. It was love staying, even when it didn't look the way you expected love to look. I want to invite you into something now. Not a demand, not a task, just an invitation. Wherever you are right now, whatever position your body is in, I want you to let your hands open. If they're clenched, let them relax. If you're holding tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your chest, let it soften just a little. And in that small physical act of opening, I want you to consider letting go, even briefly, of whatever you've been gripping so tightly, the outcome you've been trying to control, the fear you've been trying to manage on your own, the old wound you've been protecting so carefully that it's never had room to heal. You don't have to let go of everything all at once. That's not how healing works, and I wouldn't ask that of you even if I could. But maybe tonight you can let go of one small piece. Maybe you can whisper, even just in your own mind, without needing the perfect words. I don't have to carry this alone anymore. And let that be enough for tonight. Let that be the whole prayer. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't have to be long. It only has to be honest. There's a kind of relief that comes from admitting you don't have it all figured out. Our culture prizes certainty, control, having a plan for every contingency. But there's a deeper kind of peace available to the person who can say, honestly, I don't know how this is going to work out, and I'm choosing to trust anyway. Not blind trust, not the kind that ignores real danger or refuses to plan wisely, but the kind of trust that says, I've done what I can do, and now I release the rest because I was never meant to carry the whole weight of the outcome by myself. I think about the image of a child learning to walk, reaching up for a parent's hand, not because the child understands the mechanics of balance or the physics of movement, but simply because the hand is there, and it's steady, and it's enough. The child doesn't need to understand everything to trust the hand holding theirs, and maybe that's closer to what real faith looks like than any of the complicated explanations we sometimes reach for. Not a perfect understanding of how everything works. Just a hand, steady, reaching toward you, and the simple decision to take hold of it. If you've been trying to figure everything out, trying to make sense of a season that refuses to make sense, I want to release you from that pressure tonight. You don't have to understand it to be held through it. You don't have to have the theology worked out, the timeline mapped, the reasons behind every hard thing neatly explained. You only have to be willing to keep reaching for the hand that's already reaching for you. I want to talk for a moment about identity, because so much of our anxiety, if we trace it back far enough, comes from an unsettled question about who we actually are. Not what we do, not what we've accomplished or failed to accomplish, but who we are underneath all of that, when the titles and the roles and the achievements are stripped away. So much of the world hands us our identity through comparison. We learn who we are by measuring ourselves against everyone around us. This person is further along. That person seems to have it easier. This other person never appears to struggle the way I do. And slowly, without ever deciding to, we start building a sense of self out of where we rank, rather than out of anything solid or lasting. But identity built on comparison is exhausting, because there will always be someone ahead of you, and there will always be someone behind you, and neither position tells you anything true about your worth. It's a treadmill, not a foundation. And I think a lot of the quiet weariness so many of us carry comes from years spent running on that treadmill, trying to arrive somewhere that was never actually a destination. There's a different way to understand who you are, one that doesn't depend on where you rank or how your life compares to anyone else's. It's the understanding that you were made on purpose, with intention, not as an afterthought or an accident, and that your worth was settled before you ever accomplished a single thing. Not earned, not measured. Simply given, the way a gift is given, without conditions attached. If you've spent years trying to prove you deserve to take up space in this world, I want to gently interrupt that effort tonight. You don't have to prove it. You never did. The proving was never the price of belonging. It was a story you were told, or a story you told yourself, somewhere along the way, and it was never true to begin with. I think about how differently we would move through our days if we actually believed that our worth was settled and secure, rather than something we had to keep earning through performance. We would still work hard, still pursue the things that matter to us, still care about growth and improvement, but we wouldn't be doing it from a place of fear, trying to outrun the sense that we're not enough. We'd be doing it from a place of security, simply expressing who we already are, rather than trying to become someone worthy of love. That shift, from earning to expressing, from proving to simply being, is one of the quietest and most freeing shifts a person can make. It doesn't happen overnight. Old patterns of thinking don't dissolve just because we understand them intellectually. But it can begin tonight with a small, honest acknowledgement. I have been trying to earn something that was never for sale. I have been running toward a finish line that doesn't exist. And I am ready, even if slowly, even if imperfectly, to stop running and simply rest in who I already am. I want to talk about gratitude for a moment, not as a forced positivity that ignores real pain, but as a quiet practice that can exist right alongside grief, right alongside struggle, right alongside every hard thing you're carrying. Gratitude isn't about pretending things are fine when they're not. It's about noticing, even in the middle of what's hard, the small evidences of goodness that are still present, still real, still worth acknowledging. Maybe tonight, that's a warm place to sleep. Maybe it's a person who checked in on you today, even briefly. Maybe it's simply the fact that you made it through, that you're breathing, that you're here at the end of a day that tried to take more from you than you had to give. None of that erases what's hard, but naming it even quietly, even briefly, has a way of loosening the grip that difficulty has on our attention. It doesn't fix the problem. It simply reminds us that the problem is not the only thing that's true. There's something powerful about a heart that can hold both realities at once. This is hard, and there is still good here. Those two truths are not in competition with each other. They can exist together, side by side, without one canceling out the other. Learning to hold both is one of the quiet skills of a resilient life, and it's a skill that can be practiced slowly, even in seasons that feel mostly dark. I want to speak now about the ordinary, unremarkable moments of daily life, because I think we sometimes miss faithfulness because we're looking for it in the dramatic and overlooking it in the mundane. We wait for the miracle, the breakthrough, the moment that feels unmistakably significant. And in doing so, we walk right past the quieter evidence that's been present all along. The meal that appeared when you needed it, the unexpected patience you found in a moment that should have broken you, the stranger who was kind exactly when kindness was needed most. Faithfulness rarely announces itself with fanfare. It shows up in the ordinary rhythm of a life, in the fact that morning keeps arriving, that breath keeps coming, that somehow, again and again, you find just enough strength for the day in front of you, even when you didn't think you had any strength left the night before. That daily sufficiency, quiet and unremarkable as it might seem, is itself a kind of steady miracle, happening so consistently that it becomes easy to overlook. I want to invite you to start noticing it. Not in a forced, performative way, but genuinely, quietly, as you move through your days. Notice the small mercies. Notice the moments that could have gone worse and didn't. Notice the strength that showed up exactly when you needed it, even if it arrived in a form you didn't expect. Over time, that noticing has a way of reshaping how a life feels from the inside, even when the external circumstances haven't changed at all. I want to talk about community for a moment, because faith, real faith, was never meant to be carried entirely alone. There's a strange irony in how isolating our struggles can feel, especially when we're surrounded by other people who are carrying remarkably similar weights, quietly, behind closed doors, convinced that they're the only ones struggling this much. If you've been carrying something alone, not because you have to, but because it feels safer than being honest with another person, I want to gently challenge that instinct tonight. Not to push you into vulnerability before you're ready, but to remind you that isolation, however protective it feels, often makes the weight heavier rather than lighter. We were not designed to carry everything by ourselves. Even the strongest among us need someone who can sit with them in the hard moments without trying to fix anything, just present, just there. If you don't have that person right now, I understand how painful that absence can be. Building that kind of trust takes time, and it's not something that happens simply because you decide you want it. But I want to encourage you gently to keep looking for it. To take small risks toward connection, even when it's uncomfortable, even when past experiences have made trust feel dangerous. Not everyone will fail you the way others have. Some people, when given the chance, will surprise you with exactly the kind of steady presence you've been needing. And in the meantime, while you're building that human connection, I want you to remember that you are never fully alone, even on the nights when no one else is awake to sit with you. There is a presence that doesn't require an invitation, that doesn't need convenient timing, that is simply there, in the middle of the night, in the empty apartment, in the quiet car ride home, exactly when you need it most. I want to close this section by talking about hope, because I think hope is one of the most misunderstood postures a person can hold. We sometimes think of hope as naive, as a kind of willful blindness to how hard things actually are. But real hope isn't blind at all. Real hope sees the difficulty clearly, names it honestly, and still chooses to believe that the story isn't finished yet. That's not naivety. That's courage. It takes far more strength to hope in the middle of a hard season than it does to simply give up and assume the worst. Giving up requires nothing of us. It's the path of least resistance. But hoping, choosing to believe that something good is still possible, that the current chapter is not the final chapter, that the pain you're carrying now is not the permanent condition of your life, that requires a kind of quiet courage that not everyone is willing to access. If your hope has been worn thin, I understand. Disappointment has a way of eroding hope, little by little, until we're left guarding our hearts so carefully that we stop expecting good things altogether. But I want to invite you, gently, without pressure, to let a small measure of hope back in tonight. Not a demand that everything will be easy from here forward, just a small, quiet possibility. That maybe, even in this season, something good is still being written. Something you can't see yet. Something worth waiting for. Let's talk about tomorrow for a moment, because I know that whatever peace settles over you tonight, tomorrow will bring its own set of demands. The alarm will go off. The list will still be there. The hard conversation you've been avoiding will still need to happen eventually. Peace in a quiet moment like this one doesn't erase the reality of what's waiting on the other side of sleep. But here is what I want you to carry into tomorrow, even in the smallest measure. The same presence that has been with you through every hard day up until now will be with you tomorrow too. Not because tomorrow will be easy. It might not be. But because the steadiness you need was never dependent on the day being easy in the first place. It was always dependent on something far more reliable than circumstance. You've made it through every single difficult day you've ever faced. Every single one. That might sound simple, almost too obvious to say, but I want you to actually sit with it for a moment. There has never been a day that defeated you completely, not really, not permanently. You are still here, still breathing, still moving forward, even on the days it felt impossible. That is not a small thing. That is evidence, real and undeniable, that something has been holding you together through all of it, whether you gave it a name or not. I want to talk for a moment about control, because I think it's one of the quietest sources of exhaustion in a person's life, even when we don't recognize it by that name. We call it responsibility, or diligence, or just being a planner. But underneath a lot of that careful planning is often a deeper fear. If I don't manage every variable, if I don't anticipate every possible outcome, something terrible will happen, and it will be my fault for not preventing it. That kind of vigilance is exhausting to sustain, because life is simply too large and too unpredictable to be fully controlled, no matter how carefully we plan. And so the person who has built their sense of safety on control ends up living in a near constant state of low-grade anxiety, because control, real control, was never actually available to them in the first place. It was always something of an illusion, a story we tell ourselves to feel safer in an uncertain world. I'm not suggesting that planning is bad, or that wisdom and preparation don't matter. They do. But there's a difference between wise preparation and the exhausting attempt to control every variable in a life that was never going to be fully controllable to begin with. The first is stewardship. The second is a kind of quiet, constant fear dressed up as responsibility. Releasing control doesn't mean becoming careless. It means holding your plans with open hands instead of clenched fists. Doing what you can do thoughtfully and wisely, and then actually letting go of the outcome, rather than gripping it so tightly that your hands ache from the effort. It means trusting that even when your plans don't work out the way you hoped, you are not left stranded. There is still a presence steady enough to hold what you couldn't control, even when your best planning falls short. If you've been white-knuckling your way through a season, trying to manage every possible outcome, I want to invite you tonight to loosen your grip just slightly, not recklessly, not by abandoning wisdom, but by remembering that you were never meant to be the only force holding your life together. You get to do your part, and then you get to rest, trusting that your part was never the whole of it. I want to talk about forgiveness for a moment, because I think it's one of the hardest and most necessary parts of a healed life, and also one of the most misunderstood. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. It doesn't mean the other person's actions were acceptable, or that what happened didn't matter. or that you have to restore a relationship that isn't safe for you to be in. Forgiveness is something quieter and more internal than any of that. It's the decision to stop letting what happened have power over your present, even while acknowledging fully that it happened and that it hurt. Unforgiveness has a strange way of keeping us tethered to the very people and moments we most want to be free from. We think holding on to the anger is a form of protection, or even justice, but often it simply keeps us revisiting the wound again and again, long after the person who caused it has moved on entirely, sometimes without a second thought. The weight of that grudge is carried almost entirely by the one holding it, not the one it's aimed at. I'm not going to tell you forgiveness is easy, because for some wounds it is genuinely one of the hardest things a person can do. And I'm not going to put a timeline on it, because some hurts take years to work through, and that's not a failure. That's simply how healing works for wounds that go deep. But I do want to gently plant the idea that forgiveness, whenever you're ready for it, isn't a gift to the person who hurt you. It's a gift you give yourself. The freedom to stop carrying something that was never yours to carry forever. And if the person you most need to forgive is yourself, for a mistake, a failure, a choice you wish you could take back, I want to speak to that directly. You are allowed to let yourself off the hook. You are allowed to acknowledge that you did the best you could with what you knew and what you had at the time, even if you can see now, with more wisdom and more distance, that you would do things differently. Growth doesn't require you to keep punishing the person you used to be. It only requires you to keep becoming someone new. I want to speak a blessing over you now, something to carry with you when this ends and the quiet of your own life resumes. May you find, in the middle of whatever you're facing, a peace that doesn't depend on your circumstances changing. May the fear that's been keeping you up at night begin, slowly, to loosen its grip. May you remember, in the ordinary moments of tomorrow, that you are not carrying any of it alone, and never have been. May the parts of you that feel unseen begin to trust that you have been seen this entire time, fully and completely, even in your most hidden moments. And may you find, even in seasons that feel like standing still, the quiet confidence that something good is still being formed in you, even now, even here, even in the dark. If this found you at the right moment, at the end of a day that needed exactly this kind of stillness, I'd love to know. There's something meaningful about hearing how these words land in a real life, in a real season. And if you feel moved to share where you are tonight, I'll be glad to hear it. And if there's someone in your life who feels like they've been carrying something heavy in silence, someone who might need to hear that they haven't been forgotten, consider passing this along to them. Sometimes the most important thing we can offer another person is simply the reminder that they are not alone in the dark. For now, let yourself rest. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of today settle down into stillness and trust, even in the smallest measure, that you are held, that you are seen, and that whatever has felt unfinished in your life is not abandoned. It is still being worked on, quietly, faithfully, underground, in the dark, exactly where the most important things always begin. Rest now. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And you are held, tonight and always, in a love that does not depend on you understanding it to be real,